Let's go back to Adelaide and catch up with former Foreign Minister Alexander Downer, who joins me live. Good to talk to you again, Alexander. I spoke earlier to Lavina Lee about this kerfuffle and controversy over the Chinese warships and the live firing exercise. She made a very good point, I thought, that we should have been talking to the US about this, and that if Australia was making some public protests about this, well, then maybe the US would come in as well. But at the moment, China's got exactly the response they wanted. That is meek apologies from Anthony Albanese.
Well, what they wanted to do was to test our capacity, particularly our defence capacity. And when you have Virgin Airlines pilot reporting their live firing exercise rather than the Australian Defence Force or the New Zealand Defence Force, and the failure by our Defence Force to monitor the activities of this small group of ships, it's just extraordinary. And what it telegraphs to China is that our Defence Force and our defence readiness is weak. And add to that the confusion coming from the mouth of the Prime Minister, the Defence Minister, the Chief of the Defence Force. And Australia just looks a defence shambles. So I think the whole exercise has proved to be very embarrassing for us.
Yeah, in terms of capability, look, I know there are a number of ships in Sydney Harbour at the moment. They're not doing much there, but the Defence Minister, Richard Marles, and Defence officially says that they've had one vessel shadowing this group as they've gone through the Tasman Sea. But that raises the question of whether that's sufficient. And also, if they're shadowing the group, why didn't they pick up the warning about a live fire exercise?
Well, I think the term shadowing must be an exaggeration, because they're not shadowing them to the extent that apparently Virgin Airlines is on its flight from wherever it was, Sydney to Queenstown. I mean, the government is just making political points to cover themselves. But I think what this demonstrates is a very harsh lesson to Australians, that we've let our defence force go over the years. We haven't been investing sufficiently in it. Obviously, a lot of resources are being diverted into this idea of building nuclear submarines in Adelaide. I think it would be better just to buy them off the shelf from America rather than do that and waste money on building them in Adelaide, and instead put the money into enhanced defence capability. I mean, we spend something like 2% of GDP on defence. It's approximately that much. Whereas the UK, with a Labor government, is lifting its investment to 2.5% of GDP, and they're cutting their aid budget to pay for it, and that's a Labor government. So, I mean, we have to think about our vulnerability and building our defence capacity. But defence, over the last few years has been struck from the agenda. People are a whole time talking about sort of climate change and more welfare handouts and so on. And all the time our defence capability has become degraded.
Yeah, a strong call to action there, Alexander. I want to go to Ukraine, though, and get your thoughts on this. We've talked about it a lot, but an idea that coming from Donald Trump now, which I think cuts to why this bloke can sometimes be an evil genius, really, to use that term, because everyone is talking about a security guarantee for Ukraine from the US, and he says there's no way that the US will do that. There's no way US troops would be on the ground in Ukraine, but he wants the minerals from Ukraine. Well, now he's gone some way to doing that, and the way he explains it is if there's American companies and American people in Ukraine helping to extract their minerals, that kind of provides a sort of security guarantee. Have a look.
It's a great deal for Ukraine, too, because they get us over there and we're going to be working over there. We'll be on the land. And, in that way, there's sort of automatic security, because nobody's going to be messing around with our people when we're there.
Does he have a point?
He has a very good point. First of all, we're talking here about rare earths, rare minerals, strategically important minerals, and Ukraine needs to develop them and find markets for them. So having American investment there makes a lot of sense, rather than having the Russians take control of those minerals, which, by the way, is the alternative. Secondly, I know President Trump's language is sort of outrageous and totally undiplomatic. There's no doubt about that. But the media take what he says too literally. The broad plan is coming together. I mean, somehow this war has to stop after somewhere between 500,000 and 1 million people have been killed. And somehow that has to involve Russia. I mean, it's not going to stop without Russia stopping. And so he has to engage with President Putin to get the war to stop. Sure, Zelensky has to become involved at the right time as well, because the war can't end without the Ukrainians ending it as well. But I think there's a whole strategy here which is clouded by the most extraordinary rhetoric that President Trump uses. I mean, it is outrageous. But on the other hand, let's see what results he can achieve, because nothing has been achieved except bloodshed over the last 3 years.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. The proof of the pudding, as they say. We shall see. Thanks for joining us, Alexander. I appreciate it again. Alexander Downer live in Adelaide.